Hey, what's going on with y'all? It's your man Ken Jones here with another iTechnicallyKan session. And what we getting into today, Power BI. I've been telling y'all for a little moment I was going to start getting the tutorials flowing, and here we are. So in this series, I'm going to take you from a clueless to tech fluent, working within this Power BI desktop to be exact. So we're going to go from getting it downloaded and installed to connecting to your first data set, pulling that in, cleaning it up a bit, getting it into the getting it onto the canvas, working with it there to do some tweaks, start creating some visualizations, a little bit of DAX, some formulas that can help make things even better than they started. And then we'll close it out with creating a dashboard or a pseudo dashboard, because that is one of the limitations in Power BI Desktop, is that when you want to create a dashboard, which is supposed to be shared with others, you actually need some licensing to be able to do that. But Power BI Desktop is free, and 90% of what you're going to do will be in Power BI Desktop. So with that, y'all sit with me, rock with me, let's make it happen. Right, so working with Power BI is going to take Power BI. So we're going to be working with Power BI Desktop. Now, there are other licensing levels that work with Power BI, but Power BI Desktop is the free version. You can do everything that you need to do except for being able to share out your dashboard once you have created all your different reports and visualizations. That's going to take a pro level license. There's money involved. There's levels. Go to the website, Microsoft website. It'll break down, those different pricings along with what each level entails. So what we're going to be doing, free 99. So first thing you're going to want to do is head over to the Microsoft website. What you can do is go to Google and look up Power BI Desktop download, and that should pop up the link. It should be the first link or so. Yeah, I'm looking here on my screen, and that's going to be usually the first link. If you give that a click, that's going to go ahead and take you to, the Microsoft Power. I said that really weird. That's going to take you to the desktop download, and from there, you will have the option to select the language that you want to. I'm English. I choose English. I've already downloaded, so I don't need to do it. Of course, you want to make sure that you've got the specs to be able to run it. We're working with simple data sets, not running 10 million lines, not running a million lines. We're working with small data sets, so most laptops should be able to work. Now, I'm going to put the asterisk right here. The asterisk right here is that Macs do not run the desktop version of Power BI. Now, with that said, there is an online version, essentially a cloud version, in which you can access Power BI on your Mac. But in terms of that desktop, you'd have to be running a parallel and yada, 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 way beyond the scope of what we're doing here. So this is being done on a PC. I know it sucks. My whole regular workstation is over here. I'm filming this on an iPhone. My whole MacBook station is over here. I'm Apple everything, but in this case, I had to jump over to the Windows desktop to make this work. Anyways, with that, this gets downloaded. You can go ahead, install that. And if you got some more questions in relation to what's Power BI, on that Power BI or Microsoft website, in their Power BI section, there's a lot of breakdowns that kind of go into the weeds of the software itself. So definitely take some time to check that out. Now, once you do have this software installed, a couple things you want to do. One of those being, get it opened up. All right, so when you get here, open up Power BI, you're going to be right here on this main start page. Now, a couple of things I'm going to have you do before we even get started in this tutorial. We're going to make a couple of tweaks to the settings. So these are going to be good for making sure everything in terms of the updates, because Power BI is constantly updated, so we want to make sure all the latest features are turned on, so that way you can see everything that's popping up here on my screen. So in this options window, you've got a global section and a current file section. Now in this global section, anything that's changed, any of the settings that get changed with the global, that's going to apply to Power BI as a whole. all the way through there. That's going to apply moving forward. In this current file section, any changes made here, those changes are only going to apply to the file that you're working on right now. So any settings here that get changed, that's going to be different next time you pop in. You'll have to come back in if you were working on another file and you wanted to change some of these settings and have them only apply to the next file. You would have to do that all over again. So once in this global section, what I want you to do is come to the preview features, and all of these should get a check mark. So make sure that none of these are left unchecked. You're going to go down, click, 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 get all that, right? Once you've got that done, you're going to come down to this current file section and you're going to click on data load. And you're going to make sure that this auto detect new relationships after data is loaded is unchecked, along with this update or delete relationships when refreshing data. Just make sure those two are unchecked under this relationships portion. And then under the time intelligence, uncheck the auto date time. Now you might be like, well, why am I doing that? So this auto detect new relationships after data is loaded. You don't want to have Power BI. I was going to say Crystal Reports because I teach a Crystal Reports class. Anyways, inside of here, you don't want Power BI trying to make relationships between your tables based on what it thinks they are. We want to make sure that we're joining our tables together and defining these relationships based on what we know are the correct ones. So that just stops it, and you don't have to go in and unlink them after they're linked, right? This time intelligence, cutting off that auto date time, depending on the data set that you're working with, you might have multiple date columns, right? And if you've got multiple date columns, basically Power BI is creating a whole calendar behind the scenes for each of those different columns. So what we want to do is stop it from doing that. We're going to build our own date table, and we're going to hook our date columns into that table to do any of our time series type analysis. So with those two things checked, go ahead and click OK here. And that's going to bring you here to this Power BI desktop. It's not that same screen that you first loaded. And what I'm going to have you do is just go ahead and save this file really quick. So I'm going to go to that file menu, and then I'll go save as, and go ahead and figure out where you want to drop this off at. I'm going to go ahead, browse device, and I've got a file in here. I'm going to update this name here. Let's see. I'll just go with today's date. Bam, 2025, baby. Give that a save. All right, so back here, this essentially is the front end of Power BI, right? And so I'm going to talk about the front end versus what is considered the back end, which is going to be Power Query. But we're going to get to that in just a moment. What we want to do now is go ahead and connect to the data that we want to bring in, get that imported into Power BI. So there is this button here, connect, get data on this home ribbon. If you give that a click, there's a drop down here of some common data sources. What I'm actually going to do is come down to more just so that I can get this window pop up, because this is typically what you're going to see when you don't have to make those settings changes later after you've already got things set how you want to and you first started up. You'll on that home page go to that get data, and it's going to bring you to a screen like this. So the way that this is set up, getting tons of options for how you can connect to your data. Tons of options. So in this, under this all, this is just showing everything together. And then if you were to click through these different subcategories, you'll see how this is kind of separated, right? But we're going to come up here and we're going to start with this text CSV. So I'm going to select that and then come down to the connect button and give that a click. Of course, there is a file that will have all of these files that we're going to be working with. Make sure to include that link. Also, just so you know, this AdventureWorks data, this is a test data or a dummy data set that's been created by Microsoft. So it is available. If you don't have access to, for whatever reason, to the link that I gave, you can find this through Microsoft. So definitely check that out too if you need to. With that, wherever you've got that file downloaded to, for me, I'm going to have to go back to this raw data, and I'm going to go into my sales data folder here. And what I'm looking for is this AdventureWorks Sales Data 2020 CSV file. So I'm going to go ahead and click open here. going to take a second while it's getting that connection made. And then what you're going to see is a pop-up window. And this is giving you a preview of whatever data source that you connected to. This is giving you a preview of what it looks like. This isn't an exhaustive list of everything, but it is going to show you all the columns that are contained within that connector, right? Or connection. And so even though you can't scroll all the rows, you are able to see the columns. So this is good for if you need to quickly try to assess, hey, I got let's say you connect to a database and you've got some tables that may share some similar, information, but you need to make sure that before you import it, that you've got the correct one. This is a quick way to observe and say, okay, cool. This has actually all the columns that I need for this report, or the majority, because of course there are transformations that get made where you'll get rid of columns and so on. But with that, there's a couple of options here. You've got the load button. That's what we're going to press now. But the transform data would then take you right into Power Query, which is essentially the back end. We're going to get there, but we want to get all of our data loaded in first. Transform data, that's going to work more like when you connect to a database, you can select all the different tables that you want at once and don't have to click the load button. You can just go straight into transforming. But because we're working with some local files, we need to load those first. So I'm going to go ahead and click load. All right, so once that does get imported, you'll see over here we've got our data pane. I can try to widen that up a little bit. See that AdventureWorks Sales data 2020, that's there. So we're good to go. If I expand that, it's going to show me all of those columns that were there. They're going to show up as fields here. So that's good. So what we need to do is repeat that process for 2021 and 2022. So back to get data. And this time, let me see, I can just select that text CSV data 2021, click open there. And these are, all three of these are the same columns. They're just different years broken out. So I'm sure, there's instances where I'm sure that you're going to come across that. And there's a way to actually combine these, which we're going to do later, being that they all contain the same columns and we can just stack them on top of each other. So I'm going to go ahead and load that in. And I can see that over here in my data pane, and then go ahead and get it one last time. 2022. All right, get that load in. All right, so that was some CSV files, and that's one of the things I talked about, that DJ mix. So this is one type of file. Now we're actually going to bring in some Excel files, right? So this is the different cuts, and we blend them together, scratching and all that. So with that, I'm headed back up, and actually, you've got the option. You see this Excel workbook? That's if you wanted to pull in an actual workbook. So if you had an Excel file that had multiple tabs in it, you could import it via that. I'm going to go back to the get data, click that in Excel workbook. I'm going to go back to AdventureWorks. I guess I should have just clicked that icon that was right there. I just pointed out. But with that, I'm going to go ahead, open up this XLS, and basically I'm going to bring in all of these in that almost same manner. I'll show you here. I'm going to start with this calendar lookup. I'm going to go ahead and hit open. And the way that this varies a little bit, it's not just going to give me the preview straight out. I've got to go ahead and select this calendar lookup. Of course, this is just the calendar lookup, which it has a bunch of date fields. So it's not a ton of columns or anything in there. I'll go ahead, click load. Now we're going to do that for all of the rest of the files that are here. So I'll click that Excel workbook to show you that it's very similar. So I'm going to just work through this. I'll go ahead and fast forward this part a little bit so you don't got to sit with me. And I will mention, why don't I just select all and pull them in? You can't do that. Look, if I hold shift, it's just going down. Got to pull these in one by one. It sucks, yes, but let's get it done. All right, got them all loaded in here. You can see over in our data pane, all of those different. If we expand them, we can see all the different fields that exist. And now, as it stands right now, we're in the we're looking at our canvas. We don't have any visuals here, but this is considered the report view. Okay, what I want you to do, we've got our table view. So if I click on the table view, I'm able to actually look at the data here in the column form. So I'm able to actually see the table. So that's our table view. You're able to view it like it's a table, right? And so in this table view, you'll get real familiar with as you're working within Power BI. This is where you go add extra columns by creating new columns and so on. Yes, we're going to do some of that. And just a way to explore, right? If you wanted to come and just get an idea of certain things, let's say I wanted to see all of the people who go by Mr., right? I can select Mr. there, click OK, and that's just giving a quick little filter so I'm able to see what's going on here. I can see there's 18,000 rows down here, but then there's 9,126 of those filtered. So with that, you're able to kind of play around if you just want to do some quick looks at the data. That is a great way to be able to do that. There's also the model view. So if you click on the model view, this is showing you behind the scenes. Let me see if I can zoom out. And we're going to clean this up here in a bit so it's going to look a little bit better. We're going to end up making it set like a star, which is a type of way that we shape the data. It's going to be setting up our fact table and then surrounding that with dimensions table. It's called a star schema. My brain went blank for a second. I was trying to work my way through what do they call it? But with that, we're going to clean this up and stuff here shortly. All right. So now that we've gotten to this point, we want to do a couple of moments of cleaning up the data a little bit. So we've got it imported. So we got through part one of the tutorial. We're going to jump into the second part of this tutorial. So that's going to be, go ahead and check it out inside of Power Query, clean it up just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is head up to this transform data. And this is going to be right here on this home ribbon. See, I'm on the home. And this is transform data. And that's going to show up, excuse me, you'll be able to find that from that report view and here on the model view. Let me see. I guess you can get there from all views. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click that transform data. And this is the Power BI backend. This is what I would consider the backend, right? So here is where you make a lot of your transformations. Transforming data, cleaning the data, this is where a majority of time is spent, especially with larger data sets. We are lucky to be working with some fairly clean data, but when you're pulling in data from a bunch of different sources, especially if you're tracking stuff like a customer list or something like that, and you know, people may type in their name in caps or all caps, I mean, and then their prefix may be in lowercase, and you want things to be as consistent as possible. So there's a lot of transformation that goes on. There are a ton of tools. I'm not going to touch on all of these. There will be those deeper dive clips that'll be coming out soon where we will take time and just spend a whole moment discussing this transform, this add columns menu, the views, the tools that are available. We're going to do all that at a later point. But for now, the way the back end looks here, right? So here in Power Query, you've got your queries pane. This is going to show you all of those tables that you brought in. They're considered queries, right? Over on this right side, you've got your query settings. So you've got your properties pane and you've got your applied steps. So your properties pane, that's going to be where you can make changes to the table's names, which we're going to do that here in just a moment because all of these have AdventureWorks. We don't need that AdventureWorks part, so I'm going to show you how to get rid of that. One of the best things to me about Power BI and working with Power Query, and for those of you that worked with Excel before, Power Query may already be on your mind and you might have some familiarity with it. Same engine that runs in Excel is the same Power Query that runs here. So those work in a union. So with that, this applied steps, we don't get the luxury of Control Z. That's usually when we do something and that was wrong. Let me go ahead and Control Z, get that up out of there. That's not possible. In this applied steps section, the way that it works is when a change is made within within Power Query, if you need to go back and change something, you'll have to click the X here. And I want to show you when we brought this data in, basically Power BI did a couple of things for us, right? Starting here with the source, this is how the data came in. right? Notice that when I click on this applied step, the source step, it's showing how the source data came in. Notice that row 1, these are our column headers. It was able to recognize, based on the structure of this file, that most likely this row is going to be the header row. So what it did was promote those headers. So it made a step, changed that first row to the header. So now that's what you're seeing up there. Then it said, okay, if we're looking here, it has these little icons here. This lets you know what the data type of that column is. If we look here, this is ABC. I can press on that and it will show all the different data types that are available. And that's an easy way to change over, right? What a data type is in case it imports wrong or Power BI recognizes it the wrong way. And here, Power BI was able to see these two columns here, those look like dates, order date and stock date. So it changed the type. So here's the step that it added, changed that from that text type over to this date. So that's the way it works. And if for some reason we wanted to remove that date because we wanted that to be as text or a number field, then we could X on that change type and it would go back to that original format and then we could make the change. Also, these little gear icons. If I click this gear icon, that's going to bring up that step and whatever was done there. So if there was a reason that we needed to change something, let's say we did a bunch of transformation and cleaning of our data, and there was like 20 different steps here, we could go way back. Let's say our fourth step out of the 20 was, okay, we had 40 rows or 40 columns, and we got rid of 26 of them. Then we realized after importing the data that, actually we need one of those columns that we forgot about. So instead of having to go back and undo everything we did, we can just go straight to that step, right? And then click the gear icon. And then in that case, it would show all of those columns and we could just reselect it and it would add it back. So this is really, really great. And one of the cool things that you can do, you can change the applied steps, right? So this says change type, right? If you wanted, you could rename this to change type to date, right? Because that can come in handy after you're going through making a ton of different similar changes, right? If you change 5, 6, 7 different headers, do that this way. If you came back, you would know exactly what that change was. So stuff to keep in mind. So we're going to go ahead and make a couple of updates here to the data that we've got. So in the queries pane, I want to start with my AdventureWorks sales data from 2020. And what I'm going to do is come here in this properties pane. I'm going to actually show you one more. I'm going to click on all properties under it, and that's going to bring up essentially this same thing, but with the description box down here. What I find this useful for, sometimes working within a database, you might have a database table name that's, kind of wonky or has some acronym that's, just whatever. You may want to rename that, but don't want to have to try and recall what the original table was. You could do something like take that name, copy it, paste that original name there, then go back up here and make your change. So we're going to change this to sales data 2020. I've got that as the description. So I could even leave a note here of, original, I said table name. I'm going to actually change it to file because I keep saying table and I feel like file. All right. So there I've got a note to myself. So I can go ahead and click OK there. But notice that here, in this properties name, now when I look at my queries, it's updated over on this side. So that's exactly what we want. So we can go ahead, go through the rest of these and get rid of that AdventureWorks. Be careful, right? As you're getting rid of that AdventureWorks, make sure, because if I just start from the S and then delete, there's a space right there before that S, and that can prove tricky later when you're writing some of your formulas. So make sure that there are no blank spaces before that first letter. Now here in this AdventureWorks product categories, you can see that this kind of cut off the name. It was too many characters, too many letters, so it kind of stopped. So I'm going to just update this, finish that with categories. All right. I Yikes. I just looked, I was like, what is that category T's? So I'm gonna go ahead and update that categories, jump down to AdventureWorks product lookup. And the same thing happened here with this product subcategory. So I'm gonna go ahead and add those a couple of letters there. And actually it looks like it's subcategory singular. All right. And then I'll go with returns data, and we'll get that territory lookup there. Cool. Now, some other things that you can do here, if you wanted to, you could get in here and like add spaces between each of these. You can go click in, not necessary for what we got going, but if you did want to, you can just double click into a header. Now there are multiple ways how to do things inside of here. If you right click, you can also, let me see, rename is way down here. Quite a few other options that you can get to. Also changing that data type. If you come to the change type, you can also select those same items that you would get from clicking right here on this 1.3. Then you can also do this from up here in the home ribbon. And there's the transform, there's the add column. Again, I'm going to talk some differences there in a bit because there are some differences, even though these two columns got some of the similar looking icons. But I'm going to just scroll back up through this. Coolly. All right. So with that done, we've got our data imported. We made a couple of changes here to the properties, updated the names of these, went over the applied steps and how that section works. Now what you want to do is this close and apply. So this is going to be on that home tab, that close and apply. So back here in Power BI, we can see if we look here at this data column, you see that it has our data pane. It no longer has that AdventureWorks. So things have updated just as we needed it to. Now, as I mentioned, this little section was just about connecting to Power BI or getting Power BI installed, getting it opened up, connecting and importing some data. The little moment that we spent in Power Query, definitely going to be in there a lot more in this next tutorial. Just wanted to kind of show you quickly some of the things that you can do. But when we get into this second installment of this Power BI series, we're going to spend a bit more time in there, a little bit more transformations we're going to make happen with that data. Because again, the bigger thing is making sure that our data is prepped and cleaned and ready to go so that when it's time to get our visualizations together, we're not dealing with redundant data. We're not dealing with wonky text and issues that can arise. So with that, make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you have subscribed to iTechnicallyKan, because again, we're trying to take you from clueless to tech fluent. And only the way that I can do it. So with that, tap in. I'll holla at you. Appreciate you taking a moment with me. I'm gone.